Ahoy! Recently I talked about aim lock, but since then there have been some very significant developments as to the state of this effect, and I want to talk about it again. I want to address some things. Initially my impression was that mainly mid-range weapons would be affected, like for example the blunderbuss, and that was definitely way overtuned, but that could have been adjusted relatively quickly and easily without having to worry about all other weapons. But since then I've come across various scenarios where the tracking was much more of a problem, especially when it came to melee weapons as well. By the way, I still think that the stagger change itself is a good addition. Before I show you the clips, I quickly want to let you know that I posted an incredibly important trading tip on my Patreon today. If you want to make gold when New World Eternum releases, then this is going to be a very, very effective way. If you're interested in that, feel free to support me there, and thanks to my patrons who already do that. Now, let's look at the clips. Most of them are from TrickTrick, with a few notable exceptions. I've linked his channel down below so you can check him out for yourself. And you will see various different scenarios where aimlock is extremely potent. In this first clip, you can see TrickTrick kill one enemy without target lock. He's just shooting as normal. And then once that enemy is dead, he locks onto the second target, and his weapon immediately switches over to the third target the split second the second target is dead. It basically just decides, okay, this character is dead, this target is dead, so we go right over to the next one, even though they're significantly further away. And what is even more notable is that the switch isn't just a normal shot, it is a net shot that is initially fired on the second player, but then when the second player dies, switches over to the third player. So it's not just the bullet that's quickly tracking over or the marker that's quickly tracking over, but the whole ability basically being moved to the other target. The projectile aim is actually adjusted mid-fire. I'm not even sure if it's possible to still adjust your aim normally like that in that window of the shot. I've said before that with the target lock it sometimes looks like projectiles completely miss, but they still hit the target. And while that's not the case here, it definitely feels like there's some weird correction going on. But yeah, I think it's one thing to be locked on one target and another to switch targets as quickly as an aimbot basically. But here's the thing, while I thought that the stagger changes would make melee combat more interesting, melee combat is actually getting hit far worse by this aim lock to a degree that I was not aware of before. The weapons that you'd think would benefit the most from an aim lock actually don't, because at long ranges with projectiles there is still a decent chance that eventually they're too far away and you miss because they're not really kind of leading the shots for you, they're just aiming on the target. So weapons like musket and bow, of course, get benefits too, but on the level of how many benefits you can get, they're kind of not on the upper end, whereas melee is ridiculous. TrickTrick tried to duel an enemy while completely blind, so he couldn't see what's going on, just had target lock on and was just using abilities and basic attacks and basically relying on some audio cues from the different abilities to kinda have an idea of what's happening. But he really, as you can see, doesn't have much of an idea of what's happening, he's just spamming attacks and abilities, and ended up winning the duel because he couldn't miss anything. Everything was just target locked. It didn't even matter that the enemy evaded around him because even the Raging Torrent just tracked through that. This worked on multiple attempts. Now, even if there was a significant skill gap between the players in a duel, it's not relevant. The point is that you don't need to do anything except press buttons and click. You no longer need to aim in any way to hit a target. Jay Oddity already showed us the other day how melee basically tracks the target while they're walking around you as well and just keeps hitting consistently. And it's made even worse by the fact that this especially affects abilities. I found another clip from someone called Royal AU1, which I think demonstrates that quite well. He's playing console and using aimlock. Initially he is using a bow, and then eventually he switches over to melee and is using sword and shield. And what you see here is basically him not needing to aim in the direction of the enemy at all, because his camera is turned away. But the tracking of the weapon itself is so strong with these abilities that's not necessary anyways. Like, this is not to say anything about this player's skill, that's just how the game works right now. By the way, if you're enjoying this video so far, consider subscribing and clicking the bell. But I have another clip for you, this time from TrickTrick again. A well-played Trapper build is one of the strongest builds for duels in New World because of all that comes with it. You have a ton of free damage on the enemy, they basically can't move, and you get your health back. And that used to be leveled somewhat by the skill required to reliably land the traps, especially land the bombs and everything else. Now, you can just target lock and throw your traps and they will just land on the target and stick to them if you are reasonably close. You just need to be at a distance where they can't hit you yet, basically. All of your follow-up is guaranteed, so you get the exact same outcome as somebody who's been practicing this for years, pretty much. And that is not even talking about the elephant in the room, which I unfortunately couldn't find any good clips for. That's the rapier. The rapier is a weapon that is entirely balanced around not being easy to hit in PvP. There have been improvements to that over time to make it a little bit easier to hit, to balance things out a little bit more, but most of us know that in PvE the rapier is insane for single target damage, and that's partially because you're just landing all the hits in PvE because most targets are big mobs that are just sitting in place. In PvP, you were limited by especially flurries hits, you were limited by how reliably you can confirm a flourish and finish, so there are a lot of things that can go wrong or where a non-perfect execution will significantly reduce your impact. Just missing one finish would mean you're losing a lot of damage. Now you just get leeching flurry, so you have some extra sustain through that, and then you happily take at least 2, maybe 3 guaranteed hits on the target, and on top of that you will then guarantee a flourish and finish, which comes with initial stagger, meaning they can't dodge away if they don't have full stamina for your follow-up, and your follow-up is going to be extremely easy to hit because the PC does it for you, or your console, whichever. Look, maybe I'm mildly exaggerating here, maybe there are some options where you can counterplay that still, is correct, but the overarching point stands that in the vast majority of scenarios, these weapons will just be extremely buffed. Another very strong example is Sword and Shield as well. If you shoot with a ranged weapon and you miss, tough luck, you're just gonna shoot again. You just have a quick frame where you're not dealing that much damage. If with SNS you miss a crucial ability in your ability chain, you're losing most of your damage because your enemy will get away from you. You want to confirm the Leaping Strike, or you want to confirm the Shield Rush, depending on the situation, or Bash, whatever you're running, but you want to make sure that whatever your setup is, you're able to execute whatever combo comes from that in order to deal very high amounts of damage very quickly. If those setup abilities are all but guaranteed for all players, as long as they can bait out your dodges, then what's the point? Because there is just going to be so much guaranteed burst so consistently that it no longer feels like there are any stakes involved in deciding when to use your Leaping Strike, for example. Again, you can still dodge it. It's not impossible to miss, but in comparison to before, where that was a significant factor in the decision, it just feels so much less. Maybe the devs are just setting us up here, because it's possible that they're saying, okay, we want to do this really aggressive aim assist lock-on first, and then when we include a weaker version of that instead, people won't be complaining, they'll be happy because it's not as aggressive in terms of lock-on. Maybe that's their approach, and honestly it could work. Because realistically, I'm not entirely opposed to have some degree of soft aim assist for ranged weapons on console. It is simply significantly easier to aim with mouse and keyboard, so I don't blame them for wanting to introduce that to some degree. Many shooters where your entire performance hinges purely on your aim are doing this, so I think in New World that could be okay. But what we have right now just feels like way too much, and I don't believe that Melee needs this aim assist in the first place. Atlas Fishmu, who many of you know for his tank PvP montages, actually told me the other day that he has always been playing with controller. If he's able to do that, playing Melee with controller against PC players and still perform very well, then why wouldn't other players be? You can argue that this is because it's a tank, so it's fine, blah blah blah, but even as a tank, it's very important to aim in the right direction, so I don't think that this is an argument. And yes, I'm aware that target lock also has downsides when it comes to your vision around you and when it comes to trying to dodge off to the side, you're kind of like rolling around the targeted enemy instead. There are some minor downsides, but they're just completely outweighed by the absolutely massive advantage that you get from the current target lock. There are 2 to 3 things in New World that people almost universally agree on being good. The sound design, often the gathering, and the combat. It's what makes New World so unique, so fun, so satisfying when you win a fight. I can't see any scenario where taking this away from players completely would be beneficial for the overall health of the game and for the player experience. Let's be real, New World is still an MMO, and the way its action combat works is one of the aspects that makes it stand out. There are definitely options for console players that they could consider that make things fair, that give them a slight leg up when it comes to aiming, targeting, especially in range, without needing to entirely destroy melee combat as it exists right now. And once again, this makes me wish that gyro was just the universal standard for targeting on consoles. As a whole, I definitely think that things are worse than they initially seemed, and I really hope that they will adjust them. Again, if you want to make a lot of coin in the expansion, then consider supporting me on Patreon. And if you enjoyed this video, feel free to subscribe and click the bell. Thank you for watching, and thanks to my patrons for supporting me. Duke Sloth, out.